Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your story as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
We have Julie Whitehead with us, and I'm so excited because I met Julie. She is a contributor to I'm on Watch. Her story is one of the training modules for the I'm on Watch training that's for sex trafficking awareness. And so I thought, Julie, we would just start first with your story about being trafficked and then go from there. How would that be?
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for having me, by the way. Well, so when I go to tell my story about being trafficked, it's always tricky for me because yes, I was trafficked at the age of 30. And no, I didn't just wake up one day and get trafficked. I was set up in a way that my life took a path that led me to be vulnerable and have vulnerabilities that my trafficker then exploited. And so if I didn't have those vulnerabilities, I may not have been trafficked. So it's not an exact ratio of this happened and because of that I was trafficked, but it certainly adds up to it. So I'll start at the beginning. And that was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I don't know that I've ever actually said who my perpetrator was before, but I'll tell you tonight, it was my father. I started being abused by him sexually, and it was a progressive thing. Started out very innocuous at first, just little things, and then turned into full-blown sexual assault. And so I grew up thinking that my body that I didn't have rights to my own body, that I was there for the purpose of someone else's pleasure and enjoyment, and that it really twisted my world as far as what is love? And this is someone who's supposed to protect me and show me love and guide me through life. And yet he's doing this to me. And so I was very confused about what love is. I didn't know that I was necessarily being sexually abused. I knew that something was wrong and that we had this secret. And he always told me that it was something that was special between us and that most other people didn't have. And so that was very confusing to me because it felt wrong, like innately wrong. And I knew I couldn't talk about it to anybody, but he was saying it was something that was special. So I grew up really confused, and this continued through my early teen years when suddenly he told me I was too old for it. And, you would think that would be a moment of celebration, but it was actually a really hard moment for me where I thought, what have I done wrong that he doesn't want to do this anymore? And although I was glad that the abuse wasn't happening, I still felt that somehow I had let him down or done something wrong. So it was just a very, very confusing time. So that's how I entered into my teen years. And I think that I was really looking for someone to kind of rescue me from what had happened. And I came across my first boyfriend, and he ended up being very abusive too, but I didn't recognize it. The red flags were there, but I just overlooked them, and I had kind of been trained to not see them and to make a lot of allowances and be treated a certain way. So that relationship was really detrimental from the very get-go. But because I didn't know what to look for and I didn't know to expect anything better, I went ahead and married him. We were together 12 years. We had 3 children. In 2006, I became severely depressed. I just couldn't take it anymore, all the abuse that was going on in the home. And I didn't feel like there was any out for me. He always told me that if I left him, he would take the children. And I believed him. And so I decided to actually end my life in 2007. I was obviously unsuccessful at that, thank goodness. But it was the unraveling of the marriage. And in 2008, he actually kicked me, and a doctor saw the bruise and made me report it. He said either he or I would report it to the police. If I didn't, he would. And they arrested my ex-husband for domestic violence. Shortly before that, before he was arrested, as a means of coping with the depression, I got a job teaching preschool. And this was just how I was trying to deal with everything that was going on at home. It was a good escape for me, somewhere safe to be. I could take my children with me. A father of one of my students started paying a lot of attention to me, and he seemed to know that things were bad at home and that they were escalating. I didn't really tell him anything, but he was just very aware of me, and he said that he would be by my side. I did not take him up on that because I was too afraid that my husband would find out I was talking to another man, and you can imagine the turmoil that would cause. So the day my husband was arrested for domestic violence, I received a text, and I didn't even recognize the number at first. It took me a few minutes to remember that number, but it was this father from the preschool. And he said, I just have this intuition, this gut feeling that something's really wrong and that I need to reach out to you right now and I want to help. And he actually said that he was inspired by God. And I know that sounds really far-fetched and crazy, but at the moment I was kind of thinking, maybe this is my guardian angel of sorts, and maybe somebody's finally here to protect me and save me. So my ex-husband was arrested, and I got a restraining order and a protective order against him. This father stepped into my life. He showed up at the house when my ex-husband was breaking the protective orders and driving by and taking photos of the house and just doing things to scare me. I knew he kept guns in his car, and I was afraid of that. This father would show up and he'd stand at the door, literally like a guard, and protect me and the kids. And this is how it progressed for about 2 weeks. He just kind of got ingrained in our lives, and he was such an important part. I didn't have a support network at all to speak of other than this man. So I really relied on him. And then it was about 2 weeks into it that he forcibly raped me. And it was as if a switch had been flipped. Like he became this monster that I guess maybe he really was the whole time, but he became controlling and aggressive and abusive in every way you can imagine. And he told me that I was going to be taking trips with him. He called them trips. And I didn't know what to expect from them, but I didn't have a choice. He said that if I didn't go with him, he would tell my ex-husband that I was having an affair with him, and that he would help my ex-husband gain full custody of my kids by telling them I was crazy and, unfit to be a mother. Well, I had no experience with the courts or anything like that, so I believed everything that he said. When he said he could get me in trouble and, kind of work against me, I thought that was true. And I'm still not sure to what extent he could have done that. But so I went on a trip with him to California. He said he had business in California. I didn't know what the trip was going to involve, but we ended up at a motel where he drugged me, and I was raped by another man who came into the motel room, and my trafficker, this father, videoed it, took videos and pictures of the abuse. After that trip, he told me there would be more like it, that he now had the videos from that trip and the pictures that he would send to my ex-husband and, use in the custody battle against me. And so it was like the more time went on, the more trouble I was in. I was just getting sucked into it, and he was getting more and more evidence to use against me. He did end up printing some of the pictures and placing them on all the cars' windshields at my kids' elementary school to try to taint my reputation and, make it easier if I did go to the police or something, if I said something against him, that people might wonder, like, is she telling the truth? Look at these crazy pictures she's got everywhere. And so I was really terrified. I felt really, really stuck, just horribly trapped. He threatened violence against not just me, which he did. He strangled me. He threatened me with knives and guns. So I believed that he could murder me, but he also threatened that against my children, which as a mother, I just couldn't even risk that in any capacity. So I stayed stuck with him doing what he wanted me to do. So I was trafficked for 5 months. And then he made me have, it's so bizarre. He made me meet with his boss about a purchase of a vehicle that he wanted to buy, his truck. He was a truck driver, an over-the-road truck driver. That's what he used to traffic me. So he wanted me to meet with his boss, his employer, to try to negotiate the sale of the truck to him. Anyway, it's kind of a long story, but I went through with it. I met his boss, who I'd never met before. And his boss took an interest in me and said, something just does not feel right here in my gut. There's something wrong here. Tell me what's really going on. And I, at that point, was so desperate and just so broken down. I had never dared tell a soul, or I had kept the secret. I just broke down crying. And I ended up telling him that I wasn't safe, that it was a dangerous relationship that I was in, because I didn't have any other words for it. I didn't know what trafficking was at the time. So I didn't know that's what had been happening to me. But I told him that I was in a dangerous relationship, and he said, I will help you. I will get you out of this. And he helped me and never looked back. And I was able to get free from my trafficker. So it sounds like a really pretty ending to the story, but that's actually where a lot of the hard stuff began, because I had to rebuild my life. I had to go through the healing journey, which I'm still on. And that's been really hard. Sometimes I say that's harder than surviving the trafficking itself, just because in the trafficking situation, it was so much of an instinct to stay alive. Not to downplay it at all, but in the healing journey, like, I have to willingly choose to face those memories and go through that struggle. So I've come out on somewhat the other side. I'm still in the middle of working on it, but I've started advocating and using my story to try to help others. And that's the best thing that I think I can do with it, because it happened no matter what. I can't change that, but I'm trying to make some good come from it.
I think you're so brave for sharing your story. And I know that you're working on a book. Is that done yet?
It's very close. I don't know the publishing industry, so they're telling me that April is the date, and I don't know if that really means April, but as far as I know, April is the date for that.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, so many things that you said, Julie, just gave me questions. First of all, the fact that, this is a podcast, so they can't see you. You're just so pretty and so sweet.
Oh.
And it just breaks my heart to think of what you went through. But that one of my questions was, or a comment first, is with your dad. I do hear about that a lot, when the dad does cut off the relationship because now there could be a baby or whatever.
Yeah.
How confusing that is. And, like you said, you feel like I should be celebrating, but it's your dad, and it's so confusing. And so thanks for sharing that, because I'm sure someone listening is going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was normal.
Yeah.
And so do you want to talk about that a little? How you dealt with that, like when you started to get healing for that?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm still dealing with that. It's something that is a recurring theme that comes up in therapy. I keep thinking, I'm so many years into therapy, like I should be over that aspect of it by now. But that's just one that sticks with me, is the relationship that I had with him. How, on the one hand, it sounds so horrible, but to say that I liked the attention from him is not at all to say that I liked the abuse, because I didn't. But that was my dad, and the way that he showed me affection was the only thing I knew. And so I loved when my dad was happy with me and was loving towards me, even though that was sick and twisted and completely wrong. But yeah, just really, really confusing when I tried to deal with my feelings toward him. I find myself really torn, and my therapist said, when it's like a stranger, and this is not in any way minimizing that kind of abuse, but when it's a stranger, it's a little bit easier, to say that's a stranger, that's a bad guy. But when it's your father, he's a bad guy and a good guy. And that makes it so confusing.
Well,
Yeah.
you're dependent upon him. You
Yeah.
rely upon him, and you don't know any other way because he's your father. And so you think that's the way families are. In a
Mm-hmm.
way, he was grooming you by giving you affection, but only that kind of affection.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that is such a confusing and difficult thing. And if people can recognize that and know that, number one, there is help, but number two, that it is a process of working through and sorting through that, because even you're married, right?
Yeah.
Remarried. And do
Mm-hmm.
you have, are your kids all boys, or do you have a daughter?
I have 2 boys and a daughter
Yeah.
from
So
that way.
do you find that even though you're in a good situation, everything, do you does that trigger you when she hits a certain age? Does it kind of trigger what you went
Yeah.
through at that age?
Yeah. So I said I have 2 boys and a daughter from my first marriage. In my second marriage, I have 2 step kids as well, and we adopted another little girl. So I have 2 daughters, and one's 9 and the other one is 17. Yes, I'm triggered all the time, like always. I feel like I'm constantly living in a state of being triggered. Just my little girl, my youngest, seeing her at her age, and in therapy, we do a lot of, for me, I don't know if this is for everybody, but for me, it helps me to say, like, if this happened to Charlie, my youngest, if this happened to her, would I have any blame toward her at all? And the answer is always, of course not. Like, there's no way I'd put any blame on her. But then we try to bring it back to me and say, well, then why do you blame yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And with my older daughter, yeah, she's dating, and it's so it's so like, what am I trying to say? It's so tempting to just hold her close and not let her have interaction with boys, and not because boys are bad, but just because I don't want her to get in a situation that's unsafe or unhealthy. But I have to let her out, and I have to let her live her life, and so yeah, it's definitely hard having daughters.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you still have a relationship with your parents? Are they still alive?
They are still alive. When I went to therapy in I think it was around 2017. It's a little confusing. It's been so long. I actually told them that I had been abused by someone when I was younger, and I came out with that to them. I didn't name who it was. I was just kind of taking it in that first step of just saying, I remember, I know I was abused by someone. They cut off all contact with me, so I have no contact with
Hmm.
them.
So it was their choice to cut off the contact.
They would say otherwise. My therapist did tell them that any letter or communication needed to come through my therapist before it reached me, because it was so upsetting to me. And they used that as the reason why they cut off contact. So they would say, like, they were told to cut off, but that's not really actually.
Mm.
Wow. So another trauma on a trauma, really.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
more to deal with.
Yeah,
Mhm.
often we're re-traumatized by taking care of ourselves, by the actions the perpetrators or others in our family take, because we have to take care of ourselves. So we do boundaries, we set up boundaries. But what happens is the people in our families, they don't react very healthily to that. They react in ways that re-traumatizes us. And
Yeah, my dad actually, before he cut off communication, when I told him also that I was trafficked, this horrible reveal of all the things that had happened in my life, and not pointing finger at that point at all. But when I told him that I had been trafficked, his reaction was, I told her she shouldn't have dressed that way. And so he completely put the blame on me. And yeah, that was awful.
Wow.
it's so hard. I'm wondering, how did you find out about I'm on Watch? What led you to that program?
Yeah, I love that program dearly. So I went from Tennessee for 13 months, and from there I went to Boston, Massachusetts for the next 5 years. I actually lived there while I was getting therapy and treatment because it was so intense. But while I was in Boston, I would make little week trips home to Utah, and every time I would come home, I would think, I can't live there ever again. Like, there are triggers and ghosts everywhere, like everything is hard to see. And I just didn't think I could live here anymore. And then my husband just had a chance encounter with this organization called the Maloof Company, and they were a betting company. And they were putting on a golf tournament for their charity arm, which is called the Maloof Foundation. Just so happens that their focus or their cause is sex trafficking. And so when he met with them, he was like, oh my gosh, you need to meet my wife. She's actually been trafficked and she's trying to survive that right now. And so I was put in touch with them, and they had come across another organization called Safe House Project. It's back east. And they wanted to put together, the two of them, a training to help people recognize and spot and report and ultimately prevent the signs of trafficking. And so they approached me with it and asked if they could use my story as one of their modules. And I've just been a huge supporter of it. I really believe in it. I mean, I was in my own community when this happened. I was not on the bad side of the tracks or, like in a dangerous environment. It was just me. I was a PTA mom, for crying out loud. Like, I couldn't have been more of, I know I was in a bad marriage, and that's a little atypical, but I couldn't have been more your neighbor next door, and yet I was trafficked right there in my community and my own home in some state instances. And so to have a training that teaches people, these are things that you can look for and you can spot and help get somebody out of this situation or even maybe prevent it. That's so, so amazing to me.
I think one of the things that was so important to me about the modules that, I did your training and
oh, great.
It is so impressive that the key is that this happens to practically anyone. It's not just little girls being abducted. It's, and it talks about the men that are trafficked. It talks about the adult woman. It talks about how it is, like you said, the woman in PTA, the kid in Girl Scouts, the boy down the street. It can be anyone, but it's so important to recognize the signs, the things that you can pick up on, because I think a lot of people notice things and they think, oh, that's just a little off, but they don't really think about it because they don't think it could happen to just that kid down the street or the woman in PTA or that teacher, but it is happening, and it's happening, to so many people. And I think that was also really important, is it happens, it's the family too. It's not just people getting abducted, but I was really surprised that statistic about how 50% of the people that are trafficked by their own family. That kind of blew me away. But one of the men we've interviewed that's a survivor, he was trafficked by his own family.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it is happening. I like to say it's happening in our backyards because, there were places that I was taken in neighborhoods. They looked like nice neighborhoods. The home that we went to looked like all the others. It seemed to be a nice place, and yet we were sneaking in the back door, and inside was a hidden brothel. So yeah, it's happening to everyone, and it's happening everywhere. Nowhere. I live in a place called Davis County, and it's kind of a bubble, and it's like everybody feels really safe there, and that's great, but it happened there too, and that's just shocking.
Yeah. We want everyone to take the training. And I tell everyone, I teach coaching classes. I'm like, you have to take this training. But can you tell us some signs? Like, it's so appalling to think that you probably were talking to moms and dads every day that had no clue. So this one man saw something was off. So can you give people maybe some clues? And if you feel like something's off, what do you do?
Yes. So the employer of my trafficker that I met with, he, I think, Kevin, you were saying, you kind of have to follow your gut when we see these things and we think something's not right there, but then we just go about our lives and we leave it to somebody else or just leave it. And it's so important to follow your gut. That's what this man did for me, who, by the way, is my new husband. I married him. He is my current husband. So, and he's an angel. He's amazing. He saved me in every way possible. But he went with his gut. He felt that something was wrong. He said, I've asked him before many times, what did you see? Like, what did I look like? I can't imagine. And he said, I looked really beaten down. I didn't make eye contact. At that point, I was choosing my own clothing. So I was dressed more appropriately, but not completely. There's just so many signs. It's hard to dive in and say, here's the signs. Are not just something that I can lay out and say, here they are, A through Z. It's so dependent upon the situation, but some of the key things are not making eye contact. That's a big one. And I think that's because we feel a lot of shame as trafficking victims, what we're forced to do, and we're scared, we're terrified, we're being threatened, our lives are at stake. Sometimes dressing inappropriately for the weather. Like, I was taken to many places up north and in the middle of winter, but I was wearing skimpy clothing. Like, that could have been something that somebody maybe could have seen and questioned. Also, I hate to use the word prostitute, but I was drug around like one. I was wearing clothing that would be typical of maybe a prostitute, and taken to motels and having multiple men come in the room. Like, these are things that maybe the front desk could have seen. There's everything from having a relationship with it. You've got a young girl and she's got an older boyfriend, much older boyfriend. He's paying her a lot of attention. She's very secretive about the relationship. She's getting gifts and, things like jewelry or cell phones or things like this that she's maybe bragging about to her friends or showing during school or something. But maybe she's leaving school a lot, getting checked out by various people, or maybe the same person, but she's leaving school a lot. There's, maybe they're online. It could be a boy or a girl online a lot and has a really close relationship that builds really quickly and seems really intense that they're maybe secretive about. So there's a million signs. The training is so good because it shows you different, you took it, but it shows you the different scenarios and then gives you examples of what you could have maybe seen in that situation that you could have reported or been tipped off about. So
I think if you're at all wondering, if someone who's listening is just wondering about maybe someone they know, it's important to try and dig into why you're wondering, what it is that's giving you that gut feeling. And is it their relationship with someone that just seems off? Is it the way, like you said, they avert eye contact or they seem really secretive? There's so many things, but if you're questioning, maybe take this training, go to the modules, but also there's a phone number that's on I'm on Watch, and we'll post that on this episode that you can call, and you could even just talk to someone and say, hey, this is what I've seen. Is this something I should report? Because maybe it's not that important, but you don't ever want to just look past it if you're really feeling something.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't answer that part of your question, but yes, there is a national trafficking hotline number, and if you could post that, that'd be wonderful. And that's a great place to call if you have suspicions. If you see something, like there was one time I was being chased by my trafficker down a freeway, and he caught up with me and dragged me back to his truck by my hair. A car actually stopped and witnessed that and then drove on. And in that kind of a situation, obviously it would have been better for them to call 911.
Yeah.
So those are the two options.
I think it was also really important what they emphasized: do not confront the person that seems to be the perpetrator.
Yes.
Because you're putting the victim in danger as well as yourself. I mean, that's really key, I think.
For sure, yeah. My trafficker, if somebody would have approached my trafficker, he would have blamed me for that. I would have been in trouble for having made that person pay attention to me. I mean, it's irrational, but that's kind of the behavior. And then I don't know what he would have done to somebody. I mean, I believe he was capable of murder and terrible things. I mean, I know what he did to me. I know what he threatened to me. And so, yeah, I would be really scared for somebody to confront him. So that would be a job for the police.
So when your now husband, I didn't realize that, when he said, I'm here to help you, where was the trafficker? Was he in the bathroom at the time? Like, how did you get alone with him?
No, so he set the meeting up because he wanted to buy his truck from my now husband, but from his employer. And he just thought that I would have a better chance of securing that sale. Number one, because I speak English as a first language and he didn't. And because he said, because you're a woman, you'll get preferential treatment because he thinks everyone thinks like him, right? So he set this up. So he was purposefully not there, which is, he would never let me talk to another man. Like if I made eye contact with the waiter, I was in for it. But because he set this up, it was okay. So yeah, he wasn't even there.
Oh, okay. And so did he, I mean, here, this is happening at your home. So how did you get help? How did you get away? Or what happened?
So I left my marital home from my first husband. My trafficker got me an apartment, about 20 miles from that home, trafficked me in that apartment also. So I was living there when I met, his name's Barry. We'll just call him by his name, Barry, my husband now, and my trafficker's employer at the time. When I met him, he said, come stay the night at my house. I slept on his couch for a couple of nights before I could make arrangements with my parents. That wasn't ideal, but they were great grandparents, maybe not the best parents, but they were great to my kids and they were concerned about them. And so they agreed to take me and the kids in. So I moved from the apartment to my parents' house for a short time. And then Barry and I got married fairly quickly. And then I was safe with him. So.
And did the trafficker, was he punished? Did he go to jail? Was he found out?
Well, some people wonder how this happened. It's kind of hard to explain unless you have been there and lived it. I didn't tell my husband that I was trafficked. He thought that it was a bad relationship because that's what I told him. For years, until I went to therapy and found out myself that I had been trafficked, which was a revelation because I didn't know there was a name for it. Previous to that, I had always said, I had this kind of boyfriend that shared me with people because I didn't know what trafficking was. So when I finally, years later, told my husband the full scale of what I had been through and what had happened, yeah, he was extremely supportive. But sorry, I forgot your question.
Well, I wondered what happened to the trafficker and how you got away. Yeah.
Yeah. So he stalked me for about 3 to 4 years. And that's why I was saying that is because during that period, he was still stalking me and being this kind of ever present person just around the corner or in the mall walking behind me. And so it kept the pressure on where I felt like I couldn't tell the secrets. And so I finally got just a civil and then a criminal stalking injunction against him. And that's about the time that I went into therapy. Well, he was arrested for other violations against women and was incarcerated. When I was in therapy, I found out just kind of last minute that he was going to trial to a deportation trial. And I was able to contact that prosecutor with the Department of Homeland Security and told him, I know a lot about this person and I'm terrified to do this, but I'm willing to tell my story. So he let me come and I testified on 3 different occasions and told, every awful detail of what this person had done to me. And I was so scared to do it, but I felt like it was the right thing to do because I just couldn't imagine him doing this. Well, I could actually, that's the problem. I could imagine him doing this to someone else. So thankfully I was able to testify, and with that and the other evidence that they had and the other crimes he had committed, he was actually deported to his home country of Peru. So he's been deported since 2017.
When the whole Me Too movement came out, people would say, well, why did they wait so long? Or why now? And I think that what I appreciate about your story is that you didn't know what you didn't know. And so until you could get the healing and understand that, oh my goodness, then you were able to do whatever you could do. But I think that there are a lot of people that have been in situations and they probably, like you said, didn't have words, didn't know, you thought he was sharing you. You had no idea that trafficking was a thing. And so I think the beauty of the training and also of you coming on the podcast is someone that's listening is going to go, oh my goodness. They're going to go, I didn't know.
Yeah, I've met quite a few people since I've been home from Boston that have had that realization of, oh my gosh, I actually was trafficked by dad or a boyfriend or whoever. And it's awful to watch them go through that. But at the same time, it is healing to put the name to it, that was trafficking. That's a real thing. You weren't crazy. This really happened to you. It wasn't just, you're not the only one. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that maybe don't have the words for it.
We talk a lot about sharing your story. And once you started sharing your story, like with the Maloof Foundation and that, how did your life change?
Well, I became a lot more anxious, actually. I've had to deal with anxiety more since I've been talking because I have such an inner critic that tells me I'm like ratting out my parents, and I'm telling the secret that I always promised I would keep. And so I kind of have this internal turmoil with it where when I tell my story, it's such oh my gosh, it's like finally there's a place for it. You have this big, horrible thing inside that you carry with you at the grocery store, at the ice cream counter, like it's always there in the back of your mind. And now finally there's an outlet for it. And it's amazing. And you feel like you're doing something productive with it. And there's a purpose for it. It's not just this horrible event that happened to you. And there's just absolutely no point to it at all. Like there's actually somewhere I can put it and something I can do with it. But then on the flip side, I'm like, what did I just say? I'm doing that already. I named my dad in this podcast. I haven't done that before. There'll be a little bit of a price to pay for that, I'm sure. So it's definitely good and bad, but it's more good than bad.
We talk about that a lot because Kevin's wife, Charnel, she was one of the first people I ever told about my childhood abuse. And I don't know, even remember how much I told her, but I went home and I probably called her 100 times. You're not going to tell anyone. I mean, I was, and then I disappeared. Then I wouldn't even talk to her. So I understand how it's like, there's like, okay, this freedom that comes, but also there's this panic of what have I done? I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I think we always carry that. I'm going to get in trouble. And I love it that, it sounds like you've done a lot of therapy. And I feel like, I'm so grateful for good counselors because it is such a process and there's so many layers.
Yeah, it's definitely a process to go through. I'm surprised. I keep thinking I should be further along in my treatment than I am, but they tell me, you're probably about halfway and it just takes a long time. Just takes a very long time and everybody's different. So it's going to take different amounts of time for everybody and they'll all have different journeys. But yeah, I'm definitely still in the middle of mine.
Yeah. And I love it that you didn't have to be all recovered and all well before you started helping people. You're like, okay, I'm in this, I'm going to share, I'm going to do my part. And I think that knowing that just by telling your story, even though you may not like your story, that it will help other people because the statistics are so high. So the chances that if you're in a room of 100 people, there's going to be 5 people or more coming up to you going, happened to me. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is. And then there's another staggering statistic of only 1% of sex trafficking victims are identified. And so you've got that going with it too, where you have, yes, you're connecting with all these people. I mean, it's so terrible that there's so many that can relate to abuse, childhood abuse or domestic violence or trafficking or whatever. But then you've got, 99% of trafficking victims aren't even identified. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
I ran a day center for homeless women for quite a few years, and these women would come in and they would tell us about their boyfriends. And I'd be like, that's not your boyfriend, honey. Because they'd say he's going to have me meet with so-and-so tonight or whatever. But a lot of times they were on drugs. That's why they could let them come to the place because they knew they were drugged up enough to not get the help they needed. But I remember just thinking, how am I ever going to convince them that that's not their boyfriend? I know a lot more now. But
yeah, that's really hard. I mean, even my trafficker, I convinced myself he was a boyfriend because I didn't have any other way of explaining it. And then there's some traffickers that it's actually called boyfriending, where, they get their victims to believe they're in a loving relationship. And, oh, by the way, you're just going to do this favor for me. It's terrible.
Yeah.
one of the things that's also so difficult, like you were saying, is as survivors, when we do talk about our stories, oftentimes we feel like we're burdened with the guilt of what's going to happen when we talk about, because, you know, it's the story's going to be out. And now all of a sudden people will know what happened, not only to me, but who did it to me and so forth. And so we're bearing that guilt, that burden of outing someone, but they did it to us. It's their fault. Didn't earn that guilt. We didn't earn that burden. It's their burden. It's their guilt. It's their shame. But it's so hard as survivors because we've been told, you know, we can't talk about it, or we, you know, it was our fault, or they did this to us and it's a special thing. Like your father was saying, it was a special. So people don't understand why it's so hard for survivors to talk about what happened to us or to come out about it, but they don't realize we're carrying this burden.
Yeah, we definitely take that on and make it ours. And that's something that I've been telling myself for the last 5 or 6 years is these are not my secrets. They're not mine to hold anymore. I'm going to tell them because they're not mine. They're theirs.
Yeah. I mean, when they did that to us, they knew what they were doing to us, and they knew it was wrong, and they knew, so they earned the guilt. They earned the burden. So, you know, but it's hard to convince ourselves that, especially as you were so young, you were relying on your parent, you were relying on your father, and, you know, so you were dependent. So it's hard to turn the table on them.
Yeah, I'll find myself tonight when I go to sleep telling myself that I didn't do anything wrong by doing this podcast tonight, because I will feel that guilt of what did I do to these people? And am I bad? Like, am I hurting these people? Am I the bad guy here? And I'll have to reverse that and remind myself that they made the decisions to do that to me, put my child in my place and say, would I ever blame my child for this if this happened to her? And remind myself that no, I wouldn't, and nobody would.
Yeah.
That's such a good reminder of how important our self-talk is, because, you know, naturally we go to those places of the blame and shame, but then to turn it around, and it touches my heart to hear you say this, because this is the work I've had to do too, is I'm not doing anything wrong. Telling the story is only going to help more people, but that whole thing of what have you done to us, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm just so grateful for you sharing, and I just think you're so brave, and I want to be first to buy your book when you get it. And I hope you'll put it on audio too, because a lot of people are really into the audio books. And I mean, I know you know this, but we just want everyone to know that this happens and there's help. I mean, I travel a lot to California to see my grandkids. So I'm older, got to stop at every rest stop. And I love it that there are those signs, you know, this is a number you can call. And I hope that people are getting rescued. But like you say, so many aren't even identified.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing to make it more public and more aware. I think that's the biggest thing that I want to do with my story is use it for awareness. Like, that's number one to me, is people can't look for what they don't even know exists. Like, you can't see what you don't even know is out there. And so you have to know about it. You have to know the signs. You have to know what it looks like. It's not something that's just, sex trafficking isn't just overseas, which I think a lot of us have this preconceived notion, maybe from movies or something, that it's only overseas. It's right here. And so, thank you for helping spread that awareness.
Yeah. You know, Kevin usually asks this question, but what is it that, in wrapping up, that you really want someone to know? Like, maybe someone that's listening that either maybe has been trafficked, or like, what is it that your heart just says, I want you to know this?
Well, interesting that you asked that, because I have a son who's going through a really, really hard time right now. He's actually struggling with depression and some suicidal thoughts, and it's really scary as a parent to watch him go through that. And also because I went through that myself, I know what that feels like, and you wouldn't wish that on anybody. I think the biggest thing I want to say is that you can recover from all of this. It's not in some ways, it's a life sentence. Like, I'll always have this. I'll always remember it. I'll never be free from it, but I can do something different with it. I can use it to my advantage, and I can make it work for me. And try to help other people with it. I think that we don't realize how strong we are when we can tell our stories and share it and use that. If that can help one other person, then I feel like everything I went through would be worth it. And I know that's kind of a cliche saying, but I really feel that way. So I would just want people to know that if you're in that situation, any of them, child abuse, domestic violence, sex trafficking, any kind of abuse, that there is light on the other side and you can find some peace and happiness. And it does take work, but you can get there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. Do you have any last questions, Kevin? I talk fast and he talks slow, so I always want to.
No, I just really appreciate what you're doing, and I am so thankful for where you're at now. And after what you've been through, it takes so much to get to a place of healing sometimes. And I'm thankful that you're not only at that place of healing, but you're sharing your story, trying to help others to get to that place of healing. And
and that you're not wrapping it up with a bow going, life is great now. It's like, it's still a process, but that there's hope. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. There's definitely hope. Thank you guys so much. It was so nice to meet you, Kevin and Laurie. So nice to see you again.
Yes. Nice
well, let's do this again when you get your book done. Okay.
Okay. Deal.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing. I feel so lucky to know you. Thank you.
Oh, well, I feel the same way. In fact, after the last interview, I went to their house. I'm like, we have to talk to Julie.
It was very exciting.
Anything that you guys need, anything I can do. I mean, I'm just in this to try to help other people too. So if you can help me do that, that's great. And I'll help you.
Awesome. Well, we always close in prayer. I don't know if you're into that or not. So
that's fine.
If you are, you can join in or whatever. So
okay.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I just thank you for all your blessings. And I just so thankful for what Julie's doing and the work she's doing, and the I Am on Watch program. That's so amazing. And I'm just pray that you would bless them and help them to reach out to the people that can help the people that are being trafficked, and help them to rescue more people that are being trafficked and feel like they have no hope. Lord, I just pray that you would bless them with hope in their lives and with your grace in their lives, Lord. And also I just pray you would bless Julie and her family with your healing. And I pray for her son, that you would just bring hope in his heart, and that he would know that you love him and you care about him, and that he matters to you, and that would be a blessing to his life, Lord. And I just pray that you would continue to heal Julie and help her in this process, and that she would be an inspiration to others that are going through trafficking and going through healing from trafficking. Lord, I just pray you would continue to help them and give them hope in their lives. In your name I pray.
And Father, I just thank you so much for Julie's candidness, Lord. And sometimes it's hard that it's a struggle. Sometimes it's hard that we don't just get rescued and then, yay, tomorrow everything's good. But Lord, we do know that process, is important, and that as we walk through it, we can reach back and bring others with us. And as Julie's moving on to these new phases, writing a book and doing these things, Lord, I just pray that you'll bless her pathway. I pray for her son, Father, and that you'll just surround him with your love, whatever it is he's going through, Lord, that you would just help him to know that there is hope. And Father, sometimes it's hard to understand why kids have to go through these hard things. And I guess, just knowing that it's never assigned, that people do terrible things, but that there is hope and there is healing. And I just thank you for how brave she is. And I just thank you for her family. And I thank you for her brave husband, who is willing to see something was up and ask the hard questions. And I'm just so grateful. I feel like I have a new best friend in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.